I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be here with all of you, my fellow Americans, my fellow patriots, people who understand how truly special it is and what a privilege it is to live in this great country. A country that is great because of the founding principles that our founding fathers laid down as the foundation for our country, and that we continue to strive to fulfill and uphold and honor every day, and especially in this election. I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, twice. I did it first when, like many Americans, I enlisted in the military because of the Islamist terrorist attack on our country on 9/11. And I did it again when I was elected as a member of the United States Congress representing Hawaii's 2nd District. That oath is emblazoned in my heart, and that's why I'm here joining you all tonight, because it is our Constitution and our fundamental freedoms enshrined in our Constitution and Bill of Rights that are under attack. We can have disagreements in our politics as we discuss the great challenges and the great issues that we face. But it is times like this, when those very freedoms are under threat, that we must stand together, united as Americans who cherish peace and freedom and who love this great country. It's easy to forget sometimes that our founding fathers also had disagreements on different things. They debated fiercely in private and in public, but they came together around the things that were most important. And it is our freedom. It is our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're dealing with an administration and a government and an establishment in Washington that views our freedom as the greatest threat to their power. And they are willing to do, as we have seen over these last 4 years, whatever it takes to hold on to that power. It's a very dangerous mindset. When we have people in positions of power who view their authority and their position as greater than the Constitution, and are so willing to weaponize and use their levers of power, these public institutions that actually were formed and exist to serve the greater public good, that exist to serve the American people, they use them as their own political weapons against their opponents, against the American people who dare to stand against them or oppose them or challenge their positions and policies. This is what is happening in our country and what's at stake now in this election. Now, I joined the Democratic Party over 20 years ago. I was 21 years old, looking for a way to be of service. And I was running for the state legislature, and I had to pick which party I was going to be a part of. My parents, they were not partisan. They focused on issues and voted according to the issues that were most important to them. And so I didn't have a lineage of partisan politics that I had any attachment to. And when I looked at the Democratic Party at that time, it was still a Democratic Party that was a big open tent, that defended free speech, even the speech of those who they may not agree with, or speech they may have found to be abhorrent, because they understood then what remains true today, and what our founders recognized to be true, is that if this free speech of one of us is taken away, any other person or group may be next. It was a party that stood up for the little guy, that stood up for civil liberties, that stood up for our right to privacy and standing against the broad overreach of big government into the most personal parts of our lives. It was a party that stood up for peace. When you look at that party today, it's completely unrecognizable. It stands for the exact opposite of every one of those things that drew me to what was the party of President John F. Kennedy, what was the party of Martin Luther King Jr. The actions that they are taking, the policies that they are pushing, stand in defiance of the dreams that these great leaders who came before us had for our country. I left the Democratic Party because it is under the control of an elitist cabal of woke warmongers who are doing everything they can to divide us, because they recognize when we are divided, they are stronger. When we are pointing our arrows at each other, we are not paying attention to how they are undermining our freedoms and destroying our country. I left the Democratic Party because it's led by fanatical ideologues who simply do not believe in freedom. They don't believe in freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, the right of any one of us to express our faith in the way that we choose, the right of every one of us to express our criticism of our own government, the reason why we have the First Amendment in place. You don't have to take my word for it, because we can look at the last 4 years for proof. Now, Kamala Harris has declared, you'll hear the word freedom a lot when she's giving speeches, that she will be the champion of freedom as president. And yet, she has spent the last 4 years trying to censor us. The hypocrisy is so rich that she does this, along with many others in the Democrat elite, in the name of protecting us from misinformation and disinformation and hate speech. And they don't want us to be able to discern for ourselves, see the information for ourselves, and make up our own minds. They need to control what we see. She says she stands for freedom, and that Donald Trump will be a dictator who goes after his political opponents if he is elected as president. Never mind the fact that they've been warning about this for a long time. He didn't do it when he was president before. He won't do it when he's president again. But the hypocrisy is in the fact that the Harris-Biden administration has been doing this for the last 4 years. And of course, President Trump has been their target number one. Over 32 states trying to remove his name from the ballot so that we wouldn't even have the choice to make up our own minds of who we want to vote for. Weaponizing every level of the Justice Department and law enforcement at the federal level and state level to go after him in a way that has never been done before in our country's history, but that as we look to other authoritarian dictatorships in other parts of the world is commonplace. In a banana republic, but not in a democratic republic. I experienced this recently, this political retaliation, just one day after I gave an interview with Laura Ingraham on Fox News, where I was warning, both as an American, as a soldier, as a veteran, about how dangerous the consequences would be for our country if Kamala Harris is allowed to serve as president and commander-in-chief. One day after that interview, I was added to a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. A lot of people don't know about this. I wasn't aware. I had experienced a lot of screening going through TSA as I traveled. I noticed that there were air marshals around me at different points. I didn't realize that there were a team of air marshals who were surveilling me from the point I got to the airport, on the flight, and to wherever I was going, until whistleblowers came forward, federal air marshals who were so disgusted at being used as pawns for Kamala Harris's political retaliation, they had to come forward with evidence and proof, and they've presented that to Congress. It's not just me. There are peaceful pro-life protesters who've experienced their front doors being kicked down by FBI SWAT teams in the middle of the night. We've seen how the FBI has targeted what they call radical traditionalist Catholics as somehow a potential threat to our country. When I saw that memo come out, I wondered, my dad's Catholic, I wondered what makes up a radical traditionalist Catholic? What are the red flags that they're looking for? The main one was Catholics who attend a traditional Mass in Latin. They wanted to put people in those services to surveil those who were going to worship. Kamala Harris says she's a champion of our democracy. When under the Harris-Biden administration, we have seen this unprecedented weaponization and undermining of our democracy. She wants us to believe that she stands for the Second Amendment. You heard her in the debate. She says, I own a gun. Never mind the fact that she has spent years advocating for a mandatory weapons buyback program. She doesn't believe in the Second Amendment, and she rejects the very reason why our founders put the Second Amendment in place right after the First. Yes, it's not only to defend ourselves and our loved ones, but it is to ensure that we as law-abiding Americans serve as a check on the abuse of power by an increasingly tyrannical government. And that's really what is at the core of this great challenge and this great choice that we have before us as Americans in this election, not just as Democrats or Republicans or independents or libertarians, but as Americans. It is our Constitution and Kamala Harris's fundamental rejection of it. And what is at the core of our Constitution is our recognition that our freedom comes from God and no one else. Thomas Jefferson said, God who gave us life gave us liberty. How can the liberties of our nation be secured by a leader who refuses to accept or respect the fact that our liberties are a gift from God? We can't. How do we trust a leader who refuses to recognize that we are all God's children, and who refuses to recognize that as such, every one of us belongs to God and to no one else, who refuses to recognize, therefore, that no government, no person, no individual has the right to take our God-given rights away from us. Again, don't take my word for it. Look at her record. And this is one of the reasons why I left the Democrat Party, because in every way they are trying to erase the presence of God from every facet of our public life. They have shown their hostility towards people of faith and spirituality, especially Christians in our country. Kamala Harris wants to be our commander-in-chief. Now, I've served in the Army for over 20 years, 21 years now. I'm still serving in the Army Reserve today. I know there are many veterans or perhaps those serving here tonight, and maybe you felt the way that I did when I watched that debate as Kamala Harris looked in the camera and wanted us all to know that, in her words, not a single active duty service member was serving in a combat zone anywhere in the world for the first time in a generation. I almost fell out of my seat. I was quite angry. Angry at the fact that here is a woman who currently, and for the last 4 years, is a breath away from the presidency, and who tells us she cares about the military. And yet, she doesn't know that our brothers and sisters in uniform in many parts of the world are putting their lives on the line in combat zones today. How are we supposed to trust her? Does she not have any clue of what's going on in the world? The fact that she and Joe Biden have us embroiled in multiple wars around the world, that she and Joe Biden have pushed us closer to the brink of World War III and closer to the brink of nuclear war than ever before in our country's history. This is the person who's asking us to trust her as our commander-in-chief, this very same person who couldn't find the time to show up at Dover Air Base to welcome the remains of the 13 men and women who were killed in that suicide bombing and the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, who in the 3 years since that happened has not yet found the time to call a single one of those 13 Gold Star families to express her condolences, what to speak of her apology for her direct role that she has owned in that disastrous decision. In every way, in every level, Kamala Harris is not fit to serve as president and commander-in-chief. We have a wonderful opportunity before us, all of us as Americans, to stand together. There is a clear choice and a clear contrast in this election. For the first time in a very long time, certainly in my lifetime, we have two people running for president, both of whom have served in the White House in different capacities for 4 years. They both have a very clear record to run on, both on domestic policy and foreign policy. Well, I won't go into detail. You've heard Senator Vance and so many others talk about many of those different examples and those points of contrast. But really, to me, it boils down to this. Again, this is not about Democrats versus Republicans in this election. This is about us as common sense Americans who love our country, choosing freedom over tyranny, choosing peace over war, choosing prosperity over economic hardship, and always choosing the best interests of the American people and our country first. I encourage you to share this message with any friends or family or coworkers of yours who may still be undecided in this race. People who may be caught up in the old way of doing things about voting based on whose team you're on. One of the things that I could not stand when I was a Democrat in Congress, I was a vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. I heard over and over again this refrain, vote blue no matter who. You've heard it before, I'm sure. We've got to rise above all of that and recognize what's at stake. It is our freedom and it is our future. We recognize that the skies may feel dark at times, that sometimes it may feel hopeless, given the fact that we're dealing with the permanent Washington machine, we're dealing with the deep state, we're dealing with propaganda media and big tech and all of the things that they are trying to use to hold on to their power. First, we find our hope always in God's unconditional and eternal love for all of us. That is where we draw our strength. That is how, when we are confronted with hate and darkness, we respond with love and with light. Because it is love that motivates us. It is love for God, it is love for each other, and love for this great country that fuels us as we head towards this great challenge before us in this election. The choice is ours. Our founders reminded us that our government only exists with the consent of the governed. That's us. And we have a no-fail mission before us in this election on November 5th. I am proud to endorse Donald Trump as president in this election because he is our best hope to bring about a future that is truly free and peaceful and prosperous. We cannot be free unless we are at peace. We cannot be prosperous unless we are at peace. Donald Trump is a strong leader who has the conviction and the backbone to stand up against the powers of darkness in Washington, D.C., and is committed to bringing his efforts and his voice and his energy to be the voice of the people and that voice for freedom. As we head into these final 49 days, we got to make every day count, make every phone call count, make every door knock count. We cannot stand by as freedom is on the line. And on those days when you may feel tired, and on those days when you may feel like, gosh, I just can't do anymore, what I do is think about those friends of mine who I served with overseas in Iraq, who paid that ultimate price and made the ultimate sacrifice, who gave up everything, and the generations who have come before us who have stood and defended freedom. Carry them in our hearts as we do our part as proud Americans and citizens of this great country to defend our freedom today. By God's grace, we are free, and every one of us will fight to remain free. God bless you all. Thank you so much. Aloha. Thank you.